Suns fans, you know what time it is in the PHX.
Empire of the Suns.
Phoenix Suns.
Empire of the Suns.
Hello there, and welcome to the Empire of the Suns podcast. My name is Kellen Olson, joined as always by Kevin Zimmerman. What up, man?
How's it going? We have a GM answer podcast for everyone out there. I'm sure everyone's very excited based on the responses we've seen so far, right?
Sure. Yeah, let's frame it that way, Kevin. Yeah, we're going to do a bit of a rapid fire pod here. You and I have a million things going on, particularly me, and there's no reason for this podcast to be like 45 minutes just hammering on the same point over and over again. So we'll keep it short. We'll keep it sweet. The Phoenix Suns overwent the expected sort of rehaul or like a shift in their front office. Brian Gregory is their new general manager. James Jones is now transitioning to the role of senior advisor. There is also a new assistant general manager and a new the chief innovation officer, Paul Rivers, is now adding basketball operations responsibilities to his role. Gambo sort of reporting here, he's reporting that Josh Bartelstein is staying on as president and CEO of the team, but in his reporting notes that Bartelstein is not someone who is going to be too involved on the basketball operations side and wasn't that involved as well in the past, and noting that Gregory, instead of like more of a collaborative effort between a couple of different names in the front office and coming to decisions and all that kind of stuff, Gregory is just going to be the guy who is doing this. If you're listening to our pod and you don't know about the news, you didn't look into it, you're probably asking one question: who is Brian Gregory? Brian Gregory was a college basketball coach for 2 decades. He started at Dayton, was moderately successful, moved to Georgia Tech, was not successful, moved to South Florida, was not successful, and then joined the Suns last June in a role known as Vice President of Player Programming. I think where I can start here, Kevin, and the skepticism, and the main thing I should mention here, and what everyone is mentioning rightfully so, is that Brian Gregory's past as a collegiate coach includes time at Michigan State, when for the first 3 years he was an assistant at Michigan State. He did so coaching Mat Ishbia when Mat Ishbia was a player. So there is a Michigan State link here. These guys have known each other for over 25 years at this point. So I think the two main things here and the two main points of concern here, Kevin, are one, the lack of qualifications for Gregory. There is pretty much no NBA experience here. There's no front office experience. The resume that he has from a collegiate perspective is not one that lends you to believe that he would be successful as a front office guy. And then as a GM, not even a front office guy, as the general manager, the guy making all the decisions. And then two, what did he do over the last calendar year to warrant a massive promotion? Because he went from vice president of player programming, which by all accounts is certainly not the number one or the number two or the number three or the number four or the number five in the front office, to running the front office. Like, I can get to all that stuff before you can talk about like if this is a mouthpiece for Ishbia and a puppet for Ishbia, however you want to be blunt about saying it. I don't even have to go there to have all these concerns, Kevin.
Yeah, the first thing I did was I went back because they had a pretty good war room, like behind the scenes video that they posted, the team did from the draft last year. And what you notice there is, yes, James Jones is running things with Josh Bartelstein. And that's where you kind of start looking, okay, they're making the calls to other GMs, they're handling this. But also Mat Ishbia is right there. His brother, Justin's right there. Coach Bud was right there. And that was kind of the big decision making. You're at the front of the table. James Jones is at the head of the table. And Brian Gregory was actually in the video. He's on the other far side, kind of just observing and that kind of thing. And I'm sure he was involved in stuff we didn't see, that kind of deal. But what's interesting is when they try to sell this in the press release, it's like, oh, It literally says he had an active role in how they wanted to draft and develop Ryan Dunn and Oso Ighodaro. Good picks. I think we agree on that to some degree. James Jones, we gave credit for to I think had a large part in that. So how much did Brian Gregory have to do with that? I have no idea. Did he scout him well? Is he really into scouting now? I just have a hard time believing even in 1 year you can pick up on everything you need to be able to run a front office. Now, that being said, like, do you have support systems in place? Do you have people who have done this? You, in theory, have James Jones still around, although when you're a senior advisor, that's code for not getting fired, but we're not going to tarnish your name. Do you remember Kevin O'Neill at Arizona when he was an interim coach? He was a senior advisor after that. That's because he was fired. He did not actually do anything, I'm sure. That's my funny example of like, no, just fire a coach. It's fine to say fire sometimes. So maybe James Jones is there still a little bit or not. I don't know. But to me, it's a big question of bigger picture even. Like Gambo also reported that the Suns they might have 14 or 15 names already, but they probably will hire a first-time head coach. So you have a first-time GM who has only 1 year of NBA experience. You have a first-time NBA head coach. You have an owner who has fired 3 head coaches in the past 3 off seasons. It's a bunch of new people in a situation where you're the first team ever to blow over the second apron like this, first team to ever have to get out of that this summer and trade KD probably, somehow get rid of Bradley Beal probably. So it's just like you're entering an unprecedented, crucial time with people who have never done stuff before collectively. And that's kind of my most concerning thing when you add this all up.
Yeah, it's all concerning. And again, we want to sit here and be clear with what we're saying. We're not saying this is absolutely not going to work. We're not sitting here saying that Brian Gregory is terrible at this and he shouldn't have been hired. We're just raising the amount of concerns that we have, which are plentiful. There's a lot of them. It's a robust list of concerns. Something that I mentioned with Mat Ishbia a couple of years ago when he first came in as owner is like new owner syndrome, hands-on owners, meddling owners, whatever. You could just have an owner that's just really good at running an NBA front office or an NHL front office or an NFL front office. Like, could Mat Ishbia be good at this? Like, maybe. And I'm not saying that in terms of what this is. I'm saying in terms of Brian Gregory, because the experience levels are similar. Kevin, let's take out the Michigan State link entirely. Can you imagine if they hired this guy as the GM without the Michigan State link? We'd be going, what? Why are they hiring this? What has he done? Like, he's coached college basketball for 2 decades, but what has he done to, even in like if he was hired as like an assistant GM, like the number 2, the number 3 position, you would have some like mild concerns, some mild question marks. And now with this being the top position, there are just tons of asks. You can look at his experience in the collegiate ranks and cite that as something that will help him in this step, and it undoubtedly will. And guess what? Brian Gregory knows a lot more about basketball than I do, or you do, or a lot of people listening do. But that does not mean that he is qualified for this job. And he just straight up isn't, because I think there are certain guys you could hire with this profile, Kevin, who are extremely experienced in the collegiate ranks, and they did so in a certain facet, whether that means that they were successful in building up a program or they were successful in evaluating talent and getting the best out of talent. Kevin, over 2 decades, he coached 5 NBA players, 5. And the longest career out of one of them lasted 5 years. The majority of the players did not last in the NBA.
Brian Roberts.
Brian Roberts was a fun little, like, who's that guy type of thing. I remember Brian Roberts, a decent little backup point guard for a time, like 5,000 career minutes. But the other names, like Glenn Rice Jr. was another one. Like, he just didn't coach NBA talent, really. So in terms of him being able to identify NBA talent and something that I don't know what else to call it, like damage control, like trying to add to his resume in doing so through this reporting. There was a reporting from Mark Stein yesterday that he's been involved in some of like the draft scouting within like the last year. If Ryan Dunn was rookie of the year, then this would make sense, Kevin. But like Ryan Dunn was fine. Oso Ighodaro was fine. Those are not 2 types of draft picks that you can absolutely champion to be, this is the genius behind these 2 draft picks, and this is the guy we're going to thrust into the GM role. And for all of the change that they want to make and like the new culture, the foundation, what is Suns basketball, all this kind of stuff, the optics of hiring someone internally with something that we were going to talk about with how much change there's going to be, massive change. It's an internal hire. And again, I can't stress this enough. This guy got a massive, massive, massive promotion. And like, what is the backlog of things that he accomplished in order to warrant this promotion? It doesn't really make any sense. The only reason it makes sense is because of the Michigan State link. And the only reason it really makes sense is because this is a guy that Ishbia trusts and that he believes he is going to be able to work with to get the best out of the basketball operations side. We'll see. Both you and I are extremely skeptical and feel worse about the team than we did 24 hours ago, I think, to say the least.
Yeah. And again, I'll take this back to James Jones's own hire, because obviously that was he was slow rolled into it too by a year, I think, or 2 years, under Ryan McDonough, where, he was fresh off being a player and Robert Sarver took a risk and made him, I think he was assistant GM was his title. So yeah, you can use not very much experience in the front office and be competent. I think he had a learning curve. It took a while, but then he started firing on all cylinders after a little bit. But again, this is a risky summer to take a little time to do it right. But back to James, though, James came in, and I think this is unique about the NBA that people don't understand, is when you're in charge of this, it's not just like he's going to be setting culture and being like, I can evaluate a tough guy who's going to play basketball, really good basketball for us on film. Ryan Dunn, yes, everyone can agree by watching that film, he's going to be a tough, hard-nosed basketball player. If that's your ID, you have a talent. I'm sure people are better than others. But then when you get to the GM role of an NBA team, you are dealing with agents. You are dealing with stars who have egos. You are dealing with, hey, this star with an ego has an agent who wants something completely different than the star with the ego, and there's a mother involved, and then you have to deal with the head coach, and you also have to deal with the owner above you, and you have to find the middle ground for how we deal with this player, whether that's contracts, playing time, roles, whatever. And I think when James Jones came out of playing days, he at least had the experience of that and how NBA agents operate and all that good stuff that I mentioned. But if you're in college where Brian Gregory was, I understand that there's that involved a lot with parents and recruiting, but this is a different animal where money's involved. And we on this podcast always talk about Bradley Beal being benched isn't just going to happen 30 games into his tenure in the Suns. It took a lot, and that damage is done, and that damage is going to separate him from the team now because it didn't go well, that they had to do that, and he's making that much money and all that stuff. So I just think it's the experience. You can't make that up in a year. And that's the part that scares me a lot is even how the last front office group operated trying to trade KD, you're done when you start doing that stuff, when it starts getting out there and you're not talking to KD. That's obvious to me even. And it seems like it surprised them, and it surprised them that when they called every team 10 times before the trade deadline, at least, they've developed a reputation for not knowing what they're doing. So this isn't going to solve that. And it's to leave the door open for success. It is going to be up to this group of whoever's in charge to prove that when people are laughing at them on the national TV or internally in other teams' executive offices, that they look competent, and it's just gonna have to take time because it still doesn't look like that, honestly.
Yeah, and also just about how the front office revamp and changing things and bringing in new people and all this kind of thought, just to change kind of how they did things because it didn't work. They brought in someone who was here last year. That part is still just confusing to me, and it's a mixed message from what we heard. And look, you can agree, disagree with us however much you want to, but you and I spent a lot of time talking about Mat Ishbia and his involvement in front office decisions and how that was an overarching theme of his press conference. And this only further heightens those concerns if you're concerned about it, or just the chances of that being what's going on. I don't really know how to say it exactly, but you get what I'm getting at here. And I'll put it this way. We do the hyperbole thing all the time and say this is the most important offseason since whatever, but how they handle the Durant trade, how they handle whatever they're going to do with Beal, and how they handle building up the next core of the team over the next 12 to 18 months that is going to effectively decide how the next 3 to 5 years are going to go, like what they do in the next 12 to 18 months. If it goes really well and they nail some things in the margins, they figure out some developmental success stories elsewhere, which again is like where Gregory's resume is really nailed, then they'll be back to being a playoff team within 2 to 3 years and maybe even better than that. But if they fail on a few things here and there, and they don't necessarily nail this, there really is little margin for error, then they are going to be in the basement. They're going to be in the darkness for quite the foreseeable future. And that is where nailing this summer like has to be done. We talked about nailing last summer as like a thing that had to be done. That was for like their championship window, but this is more of like okay, can you avoid like relegation of sorts, to kind of put it that way, like getting relegated back to the form and the franchise that you were looked at in 8 or 9 years. And I think that's been more of the, to go back to the word embarrassing and what we talked about when the season sort of ended, it's just kind of crazy how they've reverted back to that form so quickly, even with all of the things that have worked, even with all the things that have done so well, even with everything that Ishbia and his team have done with the practice facilities, with the arena experience, all the kind of stuff that they deserve credit for and making better, rightfully so. It's still that overarching thing where they're now looked at quite negatively in the league space, at least. We'll see on the player side. I'm curious to see how free agency goes.
Yeah. I'll just close with, like, I'm going to try to write on this, but my headline on this is the Suns are sailing into uncharted waters without someone who has sailed before. Like, that's what this summer is. It's that big of a deal. And that's like exaggerating the what if it doesn't go right type of things. Like, then, yeah, like it's a bad sports franchise, I guess. That's not as bad as a sailing metaphor, whatever. But that's what it is to me. It's like they're going to do this with a bunch of people who have never done this before, at even like they've never been in a boat before type thing in my brain. And that's the scary part. But yeah, there's support systems in place. There's a lot of people who've been there before who are at lower levels who hopefully for them can figure out like, hey, this is how we get into a new era safely and at least put solid foundations down.
I think that's it. Again, we weren't really going to spend like 45 minutes an hour on this because it's kind of clear, not kind of, it is clear how Kevin and I feel. And I think we would just kind of come off as, what was that called that one time, like 9 years ago, insufferably exasperated, as one of those iTunes reviews you can still probably see on Apple Podcasts. For me, someone called me Chicken Little.
What were we doing? It was something like in the off season. I don't even remember.
It was just the Suns being horrible for like back-to-back years and us being told as the people who were too negative, basically. So we don't want to. We want to try and relieve those people. And I'm not saying those people as like a menacing kind of thing. Like I look down on these people, but it's like for the people who don't want to have it stay too negative, and we shared how we feel. That's how we feel, and we won't be too expansive on it. We'll just kind of keep it tight to how we feel, and we'll be back when they have a new head coach. I don't think that Gregory. It's unclear when Gregory is going to speak. Is he going to speak at his own thing? Is he going to wait for when the head coach is introduced? We'll kind of wait and see. I saw there was some report that I can't remember if it was Gambo's or Mark Stein's or someone else's, where it was speaking on draft workouts and how he's already been leading some of the pre-draft workouts again, like we put in the requests multiple times this year to have availabilities again. That's another opportunity to talk to Gregory, but not feeling great about that after seeing that. So not sure when we'll be back.
Hopefully soon. They should get a head coach soon, right? They should.
Gambo said 2 to 3 weeks. So we'll see, but I hope everyone is enjoying the playoffs. Oh my gosh. There would be times where we would come on the pod and just talk a bunch of NBA ball. Fortunately, I was filling in for Bickley and Murata today. Got to do a bit of that and doing that more tomorrow. But the playoffs have been freaking awesome. The first round has been amazing, and the matchup should lend itself nicely to a couple more before it's all said and done. You've been enjoying it?
Yeah, I've been, as we've discussed here, a little bit on leave, out of the picture. But yeah, don't get embarrassed by your dad, one. That's what we learned this weekend, and Ant is the real deal, I think, because I already knew that, but it was fun watching that.
Yeah, I think that was one of the few times we've ever seen the professional athlete actually say, like, yeah, my family member did something stupid. He shouldn't have done that, which tells you how stupid it was that Tyrese Halliburton's dad did that.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be back, like we said, 2 weeks, whenever the Suns news cycle picks up again. It did just now, so we'll see when it does again. Goodbye.